Welcome to the 2024 Iowa City Book Festival, presented by the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature. We would like to thank the sponsors and partners that made this event possible: the City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, the Iowa City Public Library, Prairie Lights, Iowa Public Radio, the Graduate Hotel, and Think Iowa City. Support is provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Iowa City Arts Council, which exists within the Iowa Economic Development Authority. The vast majority of book festival events are offered without charge, but they are not free. Please consider donating to the City of Literature by visiting iowacitybookfestival.org and clicking on support. Today, we will hear from author Natalie Goldberg. Natalie Goldberg is a poet, teacher, writer, and painter. A student of Zen Buddhism for 24 years, she trained intensively with Katagiri Roshi for 12 years and was ordained in the Order of Interbeing with Thich Nhat Hanh. Natalie teaches writing workshops nationally based on the methods presented in Writing Down the Bones. Her other books include Wild Mind, Long Quiet Highway, Banana Rose, and Living Color. Though she has written a lot more than that. She mentioned that she's written 16 books, and those are just some of her earlier works. Now, please welcome Natalie Goldberg, who will speak about her latest book, Writing on Empty.
Hi, it's really good to be back in Iowa City. And I like Iowa. I do. I just like it. I couldn't wait to see the land again. I lived in Minneapolis for 6 years, and I live in New Mexico now, which is my deep home, but I wanted to come back to the Midwest. You know why? One of the main things, when I used to be on book tour, which I don't go on anymore, I would go all over the country. They'd send me Bantam and then Simon and Schuster, and I jumped around a lot. And as far as publishers, and when I came to the Midwest, boom, you're deep listeners. Do you realize that? I mean, you're really different than the rest of the country. And I like teaching here too. I taught a bunch at Madeline Island. Do you know Madeline Island? It's in, what is it? Which lake? Which Great Lake? Huron? Superiorville, Lake Superior. And it's above Wisconsin, but it's part of Wisconsin. It's called Madeline Island. And actually, I thought maybe I would read. This is my 16th book. And someone said to me, why did you write so many books? And I said I would do that in Writing Down the Bones. It's a practice. And they said, oh, I didn't know that. I said, you mean I could have quit after one book? No, the idea is it's a practice. You keep doing it under all circumstances. And I just was at a political panel, and it was really fun. I like talking about other things. I have opinions about lots of things, not just about writing, but people stick me only with writing. So I wrote this book called Writing on Empty, and it was during COVID. And if COVID is still happening, I still have my mask. Excuse me, I'm probably the only one that wears one, but knock on wood, I haven't gotten COVID yet, and I've flown around a bunch. But if you wear a mask, and then I also do a virus spray in my nose, and it's really, shut up, Natalie, you've just been lucky. Okay, so this is my new book, Writing on Empty, and I've been around so long that Bantam was my Shambhala, and then Bantam, and I wanted to be published badly from Bantam because Bantam published Carson McCullers, and I was in love with Carson McCullers' Ballad of a Sad Cafe. I read in 9th grade, and I've never been the same since. I mean, it was, I think, the only woman we read in high school and college. I majored in English Lit. I'm very old. and I'm still kicking. So I had to write another book, and then I guess there was a radio show, and someone heard me from Puerto Rico. And I said, this is my last book. Enough is enough. And she wrote me a letter, and she said, don't you dare quit. And she didn't say because you're good. She said, because you keep putting out. You keep, you show us that we can get old and we can still write. So I thought, okay, now I have to think of another topic. So this one is called Writing on Empty. And actually the subtitle was Remembering What Matters. But the publisher, the head editor, who was very nice actually, changed it to a guide to finding your creative voice. And I said, no creative voice. Don't say creative, it's too general. At least finding their voice so they can trust themselves and have a confidence in themselves, even if they don't write ever again. I don't care if you write. Ooh, who said that? I don't. What I care about is that you trust yourselves, vote, care about this country. After all, my grandparents came here in the late 1800s and were running from pogroms. I hope you know what a pogrom is. People think that the Holocaust was the beginning of being Jewish. There were terrible pogroms before that. So I'm going to read you one of the wonderful things about COVID was I hated my mother for most of my life. She's been dead 15 years now. And I just, and my generation didn't like our mothers. And the reason I can say that is I listened to thousands of people doing writing practice. And my generation, they couldn't stand their mothers. And then recently I've been with younger women, younger meaning in their 20s and 30s. And the other teacher asked, who's your best friend? And 2/3 of them said, my mother. And first I thought, you're lying. And then I realized they were younger and it was my generation. We were the mothers. So we did better, I guess. But anyway, it's not a good thing to hate your mother your whole life. I knew that, but I couldn't stop it. So during COVID, I had worked out everything about my mother, but it didn't matter. I still didn't have feelings for her. And during COVID, I was so bored because I wasn't teaching and I didn't have anything to write. And so I just sat around. I'll read you a little. And that's why this book, I'll read you different parts of it. It's called Writing on Empty. It's my brand new book. It came out July 9th. And I said, it has to come out before the election because one book I did came out at the election and it was miserable. And I had the nerve to call it The Great Failure. And it was a really good book, but nobody was interested. It was during the election. Okay. Gnats, flies, moths stir all around me. I watch a monarch twitter in the juniper branches. I live in New Mexico. I look past the hedge to a cloud and experience this unalleviated ennui, this feeling again and again of being a housewife in the 50s in the unforgiving suburbs. Each day waking, going nowhere, in a quiet, almost dull moment, there is air, a lightness, it's early morning, shadows long across the cement portal floor, an opening, a leap happens. This must have been how my mother felt. For the first time ever, I'm flooded with understanding. No, I'll admit it, compassion, a softness for the woman who gave birth to me in a Brooklyn hospital, unconscious, drugged, my father asleep on the sofa in his in-laws' apartment in Brooklyn. Only my grandparents sat in the waiting room, alive with hope. My mother had been dead for 15 years by this time. I'd done plenty of psychological work around her and fully understood the dynamics of my childhood, but I could never take the big step to feel love for her. Here, because my life is at a dead stop, I'm given a gift saturated with emotion for my mother. I miss her so. My hands motion in the thin, dry air, gesturing to her, not even sure she knew that I had hated her. She mattered deeply to me, and I feel the poignancy of the years past. From a very young age, I was on my own, even though my mother was a housewife and did not have a job outside the home. I had to figure out on the first day of first grade which bus to take and what to do at 12 years old when blood fell between my legs. She rarely talked to me or asked anything about me, but she shopped mercilessly. Big bargain stores were sprouting all over suburban Long Island. Fortunoffs, Orbachs, Lohmans, no driving distance was too far. My little sister, 3 years younger, caught the fever. They shopped together. I never did anything with my mother but sit in dressing rooms, reading a book, or in the back seat of the Buick, watching the click of exits go by. To placate me when I whined, "Can't we go home?" she offered an ice cream after we shopped. Sweets became my consolation. At Howard Johnson's, I pressed to go further than the coffee ice cream scoop in a silver dish. How about hot fudge? A leap, a break in the sullen routine. In those days, hojos could really lay on the accoutrements. The dark fudge glowed in the neon ceiling lights and coagulated into a semi-hard shape curved on top of the scoop. All my female 10-year-old desire bent into that dish. It became destiny, goal, raison d'etre in my feeble life. No dreams for us but to get married, so your husband could provide the means to continue shopping. I was not a good prospect for this, but I saw no other. When my mother was 13 years old, she weighed 180 pounds. She attended one of the big public high schools in Brooklyn, either Erasmus or Tilden. They were all famous for one kind of sport or another. In gym class, they weighed each student and shouted out the number to the note taker across the room. My mother dreaded that first day of gym each year. She did slim down, and right after high school, she found a job selling cosmetics in Macy's. My mother was beautiful, thick black curly hair, black eyes, and the darkest eyebrows shading those eyes, and her smile, big, toothed, hardy. I'd watch her apply the reddest. I missed the wrong word, I missed the page. So I said, I watched her. Where is it? I watched her apply the reddest sandwich. Where is this now? Now, wait a minute. I watched her apply the reddest. Oh, Revlon lipstick. Once after she ate an Oreo, a crumb lingered at the corner of her mouth. I regarded her every move in total secret concentration, though I hardly existed for her. Eventually, my pain and longing was so intense, I transmuted it into rage. I sit in the back seat of the tan car as we navigated to another shopping mall and wanted so badly to put my hands from behind around her neck and choke her. Sometimes we'd head to grocery stores and she'd speak about the half-price sale on cheese at Wallbounds. Trader Joe's would have spun her into ecstasy if it existed back then. And keeps going on about my mother, but I won't read more of that. When I read that, I thought, now mothers, don't worry if your daughter is sitting behind you in the car. I promise she's not trying to strangle you. At least I hope not. Okay, so I wanted to read Madeline Island, about teaching up in Madeline Island. Madeline Island, I remember a few years back. First, we caught the ferry in a small town, a village really, at the northern tip of Wisconsin, where they had a good coffee shop and 2 remarkable bookstores. I found a thin copy of the novel Winter in the Blood by James Welch, originally from the Blackfeet Indians, at Honest Dog Books. Who could resist that title and a knockout introduction by Louise Erdrich? I had just assigned Erdrich's most recent book, The Night Watchman, which won the Pulitzer, to my writing students. Erdrich wrote that she read Winter in the Blood over and over before she became a writer. It gave her permission that the lives that she and Welch lived could provide meaningful literature. The ferry left us at La Pointe, the most western tip on the largest of the Apostle Islands, sacred to the Anishinaabe people. Erdrich belongs to this tribe. And what I know is that we all have to know that it's okay, our lives are to write about. And we think, oh, I just have an ordinary life. I've never been to Paris. I've never done anything. And what I really feel is we have to have a confidence in our experience that it's okay to write it. Are you taping everything I
No,
say?
I'm just
Okay,
taking pictures here and there, sorry.
don't take pictures either, please.
Don't take this.
No, just because,
Okay, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. You don't need to be sorry. Where was I? Oh, that if you have a grilled cheese sandwich, that's good enough to write about. And that I've noticed that writers here, Louise Erdrich, and that she read it over and over. If you read Winter in the Blood, which is a great title, the book is kind of ordinary, but she read it over and over because that was like her life. And she was saying to herself, you mean I could write about that? Do people understand that? That it's really important to know that our lives matter. And voting matters. Okay. Okay. I had also assigned Negroland by Margot Jefferson, and in an inspired leap, a movable feast, thinking the crew who had signed up with me and traveled so far would be delighted to read a classic. The Wednesday afternoon, we were to go over the Hemingway book. My 2 trusty longtime assistants, Dorothea and Carrie, set up 4 chairs in the front of the room and chose 4 of the 60 waving hands of students in attendance. We were creating a panel to comment on the Hemingway book they had read. Each participant had 3 minutes, and Carrie and Dorothea fed them easy questions to help them, such as, how did you like the book? We planned to do 3 rounds of 4 participants, which made 12 in all with comments. I sat on the side to listen and observe. The first participant stood up. I hate the book. Who does he think he is? Come on. He knew Picasso. Who is he kidding? And he spent all his time in French cafes. Give me a break. My mouth fell open. I tried to be objective. My jaw became awfully tight. It continued like this. One response I particularly remember. and he puts in French words. I don't speak French. How did he expect me to know incrochable, framboise, oh la vie? She read from the book with faulty expression, and I read from the book with faulty expression. The French words could easily have been figured out from context. Of course, you don't know French, so I thought we're ignorant Americans. We only learn English and think everyone should speak our language. I also thought this is the result of the internet. They don't have a historical sense that Picasso and Hemingway were both struggling artists in the 30s in Paris. They think everything happens in present tense. I also thought, I can't possibly spread the love of the written word across the country anymore. I've been trying for 50 years. I give up. Let the internet win. I'm thankfully on my way out before too much more damage is done. After the third proud panel round sat down, they certainly expressed themselves, no holds barred. I asked, now, would you like to hear how I feel about the book? All heads nodded. You know, writing down the bones, they all had read it. It's why they were here. The chapter on writing in cafes, they all eagerly nodded. Where do you think I got the idea? I held up a movable piece. As a young writer, I pored over the pages to get hints on how to write. From his descriptions, the rain in Paris, the snow, I learned to include weather. I read out loud parts I loved. They cowered. Please read this book again. I asked how many had seen the recent 3-part documentary. A smattering of hands. Few had. Yes, it's true he didn't live an exemplary life, I told them, but still he kept showing up to write. That's why I teach writing practice. It's my hope to close the gap between someone's fine, deep, connected writing and how they live their life. A writer doesn't have to be mad or an alcoholic to squeeze out their writing. Writing and life can be more coincident, can be seen as a practice, not holy, not precious. Instead, you show up and continue as long as you live. In all fairness, 3 months later, one of the participants wrote me, I'm learning French, and another, I'm saving up to go to Europe. I've never been or conceived before that I could do it. Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. I know I wrote about that. Oh, okay, wait. Okay. Here. So it's the end of the workshop. I call them retreats because we usually are in silence. So it was the end of the workshop at Madeline Island, the retreat. And I think we met for a week. And, you know, we're eating our last meal and then we get on these ferries and go. And I turned my head. Where are you from? I asked, turning my head, half a sandwich in my hand. Illinois. I remember the joy for me in that workshop was that because it was in Wisconsin, many Midwesterners who would normally not travel to either coast for a workshop made it to the center of the country. Chicago, oh no, a small town south of there. I nodded, popped a corn chip into my mouth. My girlfriend died, she confessed. Really? I'm sorry. As in friend or partner? Oh no, she put her left hand to her mouth. We were friends. We owned a house together. Now she had my curiosity. So you had separate bedrooms? No, we slept together. I nodded again. This time I stopped eating and gave her my full attention. She was very meticulous, and I knew she left full instructions on how to take care of the house. I know she read your first book. I found her notebooks. Oh, so the instructions were in there? Oh, I would never read her notebooks. Of course not, I agreed. But after 6 months, I did. Ah, now we were getting someplace. I raised my right eyebrow. She continued. She kept writing to someone named Natalie, asking for help, and she told all kinds of things to her. Really? Not for a moment did she mention that Natalie in the notebooks and me sitting in front of her was the same person. Finally, I thought to look on her computer. Sure enough, there was everything I needed to know about the house. So are you trying to date now? Men or women? I asked. She seemed a little taken aback. Oh, I don't date women. You know how society is. Fuck society. I decided to go all out for her. Do what you want. Maybe not where you live, but everyone is coming out one way or another these days. A small smile crept across her lips. I had to come here to meet you. I think you meant so much to my girlfriend. It wasn't easy. How would I get here? How did you get here? Well, I thought Natalie has come to the Midwest. My coworkers really supported me. I not only had to drive, I had to take a ferry. Yeah, that ferry is tricky. Driving a car onto it. You don't travel much. She nodded. I feel honored that you came. Hand on heart. I meant it. I never saw her again. Suddenly I realized it's not one of you, is it? I think I would recognize you. So it's hard now with publishing, especially with the internet, with everybody writing their own, publishing their own books. So my new agent, oh, I know, did I start to tell you? I wanted to be a Bantam, but also that's how long I've been a Bantam. I did 5 books at Bantam, and Leslie Meredith was mentoring at Bantam when I was there mentoring, and then she became the big shot editor at Simon and Schuster, and eventually, many years later, she's now an agent, and she's my agent. So you see, you hang in there long enough, there's a whole world. And so she kept pushing me to do a writing on empty roadmap. So writing instructions, and I don't want to anymore. So she's talked me into it by calling it a roadmap. And so only at the back of the book. And maybe I'll read you one just for the heck of it. Oh, okay, section 2, it goes on and on, you don't want to hear this, but section 2, I visit Hemingway's grave. I often visit graves of people, that writers and visual artists that I like. And Hemingway I wanted to do since I was young, even though he's a jerk. I like his nonfiction writing a lot. And so I write about going to Idaho. I never expected to be in Idaho. But during COVID, there was space to do other things. I should teach a class, what did you do during COVID? I'll give you a hint. I was frozen for a long time. And then I just got moving, physically moving. I don't mean running. I mean moving. I traveled a lot. I just travel up and back there. Okay, so I'm going to just read you a little from part 2, which was the cemetery. And this is what turns writers on. I was so excited. This didn't have chapters. This I made into part 1, part 2, part 3. Now that was a big deal for me. And this new book, unconsciously, I'm doing it. What am I doing it with this one? Section 1, Section 2. Very exciting. Just these stupid little things writers like. Don't you wish the world was easy again like that? You know, I have to say, I love the US mail, but somebody is messing it up. I bought tons of stamps. They have John Lewis stamps. I bought 3 sheets. What's his name? Who wrote A Lesson Before Dying? Ernest Gaines, I bought 2 sheets of that. He's a killer writer. Toni Morrison, 2 sheets. I keep buying, so they're publishing great stamps, but they're doing a terrible job. But I like it. I don't like the terrible job, but I like the US mail. Part 2, the cemetery. Here's a writing hint. What writers had an elemental influence on your life? Who, even years after you read them, you remember their impact? Talk to one of them in writing. Tell them how important they were to you. What else do you want to say? Go ahead. Pour out your heart to them. What was your life like when you read their work? Give background. I was in my 2nd year of college, miserable, majoring in engineering. Or it was autumn. I sat by the thundering Niagara, your book on my lap, page 121, or begin, I never wanted to read you. The author can be dead or alive. For Natalie, the last part changed me into 3rd person. For Natalie, Idaho was that mysterious place where all literature coalesced, but she'd never been there before she went to Hemingway's grave. Tell about a place you've never been, one you never imagined going to. Okay. So, let's see what time it is. So are there any questions? Usually I intersperse it, but.
If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you.
You can't speak loud enough. Come on, Midwesterners.
I think they're intimidated.
Oh, you don't need to be intimidated by me. Last night I couldn't, what was it called? I couldn't. The light.
Hey, Natalie.
Yeah.
So I was one of the people who was lucky enough to do during lockdown. You had some Zoom programs, and for me, it was, as I'm sure it was for so many, just such an important connection line to other creative feeling folks all over the place. And I just was curious, like, what that did for you to facilitate that
Is it the one
community.
where I was in Port Townsend, the first one?
I believe I did 2 of them, and I think one
with
you were
me
in
and
Taos.
Dorothea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was scary because I don't like the internet, if you've gotten that hint. And I don't care about it, and I won't, I don't try to learn anything. And I hired someone to teach me, and I took notes, and as soon as they left, I couldn't remember any of it, even with the notes. But anyway, Shambhala set it up for me. They said, I'll set up everything. And I kept saying, we're going to do what? Zoom. And it was weird because you just like are an entertainment. You don't see, I'm used to physically feeling people. Like I told you that Midwesterners are deep listeners, and I feel you. You can't feel anyone with Zoom. And I think there were 2,400 people that signed up that finally got to be with Natalie. I didn't know that many people wanted to study with me. And I thought, I couldn't tell by the books that were sold. And it was scary because there was no one there. I just looked at myself and had to talk. It was very weird. And I can't even remember the name of I kept saying, I forgot, Zoom, zip, zap, Zoom. I couldn't remember it was Zoom. But I have to admit, I've continued. Why? Because I've seen the students, the people who read actually did grow, and that they learned how to write, even though I didn't like it. So I've kind of adjusted now. And I gave a big reading in Maine for Edna St. Vincent Millay. Do you know that poet? I hope some of you know. No one in New Mexico had ever heard of her. It broke my heart. And in Rockland, Maine. And I was jolted to see all those people in person again, because I realized Zoom was nice. I could stay home. But I like seeing you, and I like being with you, and I like making you laugh, and I like laughing, and I like seeing Iowa City. It's really changed. It's become very cosmopolitan. And that big sign, what is it? I just came from Montgomery, Alabama. I took a whole group.
Yeah, it's that one of Burlington.
Weaponize your privilege to help, to save Black bodies. Yeah. I thought, wow, because some of my friends said, you're going to Iowa? And so I took a picture of it and I'm going to send it to them. Only Iowa would say that.
Hi, Natalie. I'm just wondering how or if you balance your creative art, painting, with writing, if you do that, if you feel a preference for one or the other, or a focus on one or the other, how that works.
People, I don't know if everyone knows I paint too, but writing is my deep practice. Painting is my darling pleasure. But I hinted when Wild Mind came out, one of my paintings was on the cover. No one ever asked. I hinted then that I painted, but it's fun for me. And I usually used to use the same pen that I wrote with. I would draw with the same. I kept it very, because visual art could be, heavy and carrying things and stuff. And so I just kept it. I have 16 by 12 pages and I have 20 by 14. And recently I've been doing pastels, 9 by 12.
Hi, Natalie. My name's Jennifer. I'm actually in the chaplaincy group at UPIA.
Oh,
and I listen to you often, and I love your talks. I'm wondering if you can say a little about the relationship of your Zen practice and your writing practice.
There's no separation. That's what I realized was people didn't know that I was just teaching Zen, and that writing down the bones is a way to apply Zen to writing. And then and from there you could apply it to anything, to painting. For me, it was spontaneous combustion in 1974 that I began painting, writing, and meditating. But I was naive when Bones came out in 1986. I thought everybody knew it was Zen, but people didn't know what Zen was then. So why did I think that they would know that I was teaching Zen? It took a long time for people to realize that. But and that's why it has a root. You Midwesterners like that. And it has a root, so it stayed and it keeps selling like crazy. Don't think I make a lot of money. I did a terrible contract. It was my first book and I did a bad contract. But it keeps selling and I'm glad of that. Okay, any other questions? You can ask anything.
Well, I was going to ask
except what kind of pen I use.
I was going to ask you what contemporary writers that you enjoy other than Louise Erdrich.
Oh, okay. I love that question. I've been reading a lot. I've been wanting to read Main Street forever, and I finally got to read it. You know, Chronicles by Bob Dylan. What am I reading now? Oh, this man that I love that actually, if you were in my class, that big Zoom class, Mengistu, Dina Mengistu. He wrote a wonderful book called, what's the title of it? The first. Oh, okay. He's from, it was about being an immigrant, and everyone loved it. And I assigned that to 2,500 people. And some of you might have been there. And then recently I found his third book, which was about immigrants, but I couldn't even understand it. It jumped all over. But I thought, he knows what he's talking about. It's just me that doesn't get it. So I went to his second book. I'm reading his second book. I actually brought it with me, and I'm reading it. So Mengistu, I love. I love Chigozie Obiama, The Fisherman. Do you know his work? Yeah, The Fisherman it's a knockout. And he wrote this. I met him because he came to the States and he lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. After he wrote The Fisherman, he was 28 years old, and it's an extraordinary book. So I talked Taos into bringing him down, and I met him and we became friends. And he's written now 3 books, and they're all good. Okay, let me think. Oh, Toni Morrison. Just recently, I mean, I've read her books, but recently I read The Bluest Eye again, which is her first book. What a brave person. For the I read books more as a writer. What a writer. Wow, that's her first book. See, I read her later books, but I thought, you know, you should read her first book. What? I mean, wow. I hope you read it if you haven't read it, because I study people's minds is the basic thing I'm doing. Let me think, who else? I recently read a Palestinian woman. Help me, what's her name? It was about Paris, and he lived in Paris and then he came over, but it was a woman. Does anyone know? My memory isn't so great anymore. Departures by Paul Zweig. Have any of you read that? No. And then I mentioned Carson Colors, Willa Cather. I'm big on those. I love that you asked this, and I wish I knew more. I know many more. I've been reading a lot. I've been reading a lot of Israeli authors because I never had. So I decided I needed to read them and to know them. But that isn't.
In all the years that you've been teaching, how have your students changed as far as their work?
Oh, well, they don't hate their mothers anymore. But the other way, the reason I stopped teaching is because they all are into the internet. And if you're going to study with me, you don't mess with the internet. You certainly don't do it while you're with me. But what happens is people don't know how to just describe with words, me to you, how to get someplace, how to get home to your house, that it's a privilege to know how, first of all, to have a house or to have a home or an apartment. And then we should know how to tell someone how to get there. Now people just say, well, look it up. I said, I don't look up anything. I want you to describe it to me. And the first time I realized that we were in trouble, I was in Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine. And my friend told me about a restaurant. And I, of course, this is how I do it. I ask, excuse me, could you tell me where this street is First of all, now you can't even get them they're all plugged in. You know, I have to grab them and they don't even hear, excuse me. And so finally someone said, well, I don't know where it is, but I can look it up. I said, don't look it up. I said, how long have you lived here? 20 years. I said, someone said it's right close. They said, well, I'll look it up for you. No, I want to find out. It was the next block. And they either didn't know or had lost it, just lost it. And then my teacher that I told you that I hired to teach me the computer, he said he's finding himself, he knows Santa Fe really well, but gas directions anyway, even though he knows how to get places. I mean, what's happening is we're all becoming morons. I mean, seriously. And actually the middle of this book is about that it frightens me. And I stopped teaching because I need people to be awake. What I'm really doing is waking people up. And people are not, they're losing it. The internet, and you believe it, all it is if someone is making money on you, it's not any different than something else, than buying a car. I heard this, okay, Natalie, enough. You got your point across. I just can't believe I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. Excuse me. Yes.
Go on practicing Zen, writing, self-inquiry and writing, asking questions, asking deep questions, asking the right question is very important. How do you approach the process of generating questions that you ask yourself? And what questions are you asking about yourself and the world these days?
That's a good question because I've never asked a question until recently. What I usually do is do writing practice. So we live in discursive thinking, constant comment. But in order to write well, I have to dive below it. And I let writing do writing. But recently, and I don't know if it's out of laziness or my hand isn't as strong as it used to be, and I handwrite, is I have been looking at immigration a lot and realizing that my grandfather immigrated here in the late 1800s, and it was really hard for him. And then I realized I went to see Byron Stevenson. I brought a whole group to see his work in Montgomery, Alabama. And I realized these people never immigrated. They were dragged over here. And so, I'm having compassion for my grandfather, who I love deeply. And as a Jew, he was running from pogroms. And then also realizing there's a whole bunch of people that did not even have the pleasure of immigrating or being immigrants. And we hear about that all the time now. So it's about looking and paying attention. You know what I mean? Really feeling the texture of your life and what's around you. And that we're interconnected with everybody. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. So, sometimes that's hullabaloo, that writing the right question. Shut up and write sometimes. Just keep your hand going and you'll learn a lot. And pay attention, look around.
We take one last question before we
Sure.
go to the sign.
It's fun.
Mine's more of
My
a
opinion on everything.
comment. I just wanted to thank you so much for the long quiet highway. This was way back in the 90s, and I was doing a student teaching, and I was working at a school that was actually a very violent school, and it was a very hard school to teach at. And I remember that book. I would get on the train, and I was from Arizona, so that whole thing was really new to do. And I would read your book, And it was just so peaceful, and it just really got me through that time period, and it really inspired me in so many ways.
But it also, what it was, Long Quiet Highway, was I wanted to tell you about my Zen teacher, Katagiri Roshi. But I knew that I finally understood that I couldn't begin there for the US to understand a Zen teacher, a Japanese Zen teacher. So we all went, well, I thought at the time, everyone went to public schools. I have a lot of friends now who went to private schools. I make fun of them. But I love public school, and I have a teaching certificate. So I knew until I didn't show you Katagiri, my teacher, till page 100. I told you about my public school teachers, my good ones and my bad ones. And I had some bad ones, a lot of bad ones, but I liked them too. When I was writing, I liked them too. I like Mr. Nolan. We did ivory soap Parthenons. It was absurd, but and he would always trip over my school bag, I remember. And he must have been, shut up, Natalie, you wrote about it.
It was so beautiful. And I have to tell you, so then years later, I was in my 50s, and I got married to a man who is actually in your, talking about interconnected, he's in your the Order of Interbeing.
Oh, with Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I said, we live in Davenport, Iowa now. And I said, oh, we're so close to Iowa City. And I saw that you were here, and I said, I just gotta go.
Good.
So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you.
Katagiri Roshi, who died at 1990, so that I was just blown out. He was the first person that I'd ever met that died. I was very lucky, actually. I was 42. And I went to Plum Village to be with Thich Nhat Hanh because but you have having a teacher is a wonderful thing. And this thing about, I have a teaching certificate in the public schools, and that was my most wonderful time, was teaching in the public schools. And when Bones came out, and I didn't do it anymore for 35 years, I just taught people who came to study with me. I didn't have enough time to listen to myself. I always miss the public schools. I'd stop at a gas station, and a young kid in Espanola would help me with the gas because I couldn't figure it out. And I'd say, what are you reading in school? He looked at me like I was crazy. But public school matters. It's wonderful. We're reading and writing because of that. And we should honor teachers. In China and so many places, they honor teachers. Because what you're doing is you're sharing what you know. It's really important. You Midwesterners should know that. Okay.
Thank you so much for all your years of teaching. And Natalie Goldberg will happy to talk with you, sign copies of the book for you. We'll have it set up over there. Thank you.